Hello everyone, today is the day that the new adventure for Hearthstone, One Night in Karazhan, releases upon the world. I already did my sort of card review, card by card, to talk about sort of the possibilities that I think existed in each card and the ways that you might be able to use them. But I wanted to do sort of an overall look at what I think the best cards in the set are, as well as the cards that I think people are kind of sleeping on, the cards that I think are underrated. So here we go with the top 5 cards in the set, as well as what I think are the top 5 sleepers of the set that we'll see more from than people seem to think. So let's start with number 5. Top 5 cards in the set is Arcane Giant. This is a card that I think is pretty powerful in so far as it offers a way for controlling decks to generate a cheap threat late in the game. This is pretty important from like a tempo perspective for a lot of control decks, because one of the problems with like spell-heavy control decks in many cases is that they have a lot of reactive cards that allow them to kill what their opponent plays, but don't necessarily have the ability to turn the corner effectively. But Arcane Giant actually provides that. If you're playing a spell-heavy deck, you can very easily potentially get to the point that you have an Arcane Giant for just a couple of mana or even no mana, and be able to both react to your opponent's board and generate a big threat in the process. So I think this is a card that will see a lot of play in spell-heavy control decks, maybe even combo decks that look to finish with Arcane Giant plus charge, things like that. So definitely a card to look out for in the Giant family. As far as underrated cards, at number 5 I have Avian Watcher. And let me reiterate that by underrated cards, I don't necessarily mean these are cards that are going to be, breaking down the doors of the metagame. These are cards that I think have been kind of overlooked and have the potential, at least in particular types of decks, to be very effective. Avian Watcher is one of those cards. I think Avian Watcher, which can be a 4/7 taunt for 5, is a very powerful card in the right deck. As to whether that deck is going to be good in the metagame, it's unclear, but I do think that there's a lot of tools for secret-based mage decks, perhaps even some more defensive secret-based hunter decks with things like Cloaked Huntress that can potentially have a little bit of a jump in power thanks to Avian Watcher, giving them a big body to keep them alive in the middle of the game. 4/7 is effectively the total stats of a Sludge Belcher. Obviously, it's not as resilient to getting hit by big minions or removal as a Sludge Belcher is, but overall it can absorb an equivalent amount of damage in a lot of matchups, and that's a really big deal. Even like a Savannah Highmane doesn't attack through the front half, and that is clearly a really good defensive minion in the right situation. So I think that card has definitely been underrated a bit. As far as top cards from the set, the Curator comes in at number 4. This is a card that, when I first looked at it, I kind of thought would be a little bit too difficult to use. I think that it can potentially fit in some sort of combo decks to find a individual combo piece, like say an Alexstrasza. And my thought was that a lot of those combo decks can already draw a bunch of cards as it is, because it's pretty easy to draw cards. Say in Freeze Mage, you can find your Alexstrasza pretty much every game, and you're probably not going to slot in the Curator into your Freeze Mage deck. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it helps open up the possibility for more decks that don't necessarily have all of those tools. It's a strong value card in decks that are looking to play a longer value game. It can potentially give you that combo tool like your Alexstrasza or whatever else, or just give you a strong attrition-based plan against other opponents. So I think the Curator, it's going to be an interesting challenge for a lot of players to figure out how best to use. But I think once they do, we're going to find that the Curator is one of the top cards in the set. From the underrated side, at number 4, I have Onyx Bishop. This is a card that a lot of people looked at and they're like, well, Resurrect wasn't that good, why would this be good? And there's a couple of things going on there. One is the fact that redundancy is important in any deck that's looking to leverage a certain type of effect. You only get to play 2 copies of Resurrect in a deck that's looking to resurrect things, and if you're playing a deck that's full of Injured Blade Masters, other stuff that is great to bring back from the dead, you don't necessarily have your Resurrect when you want it. The other is that Onyx Bishop just provides a body in itself. Yes, the body isn't amazing. It's a 3/4 for 5, but it's giving you that in addition to whatever it is that you're bringing back with the Onyx Bishop. So let's say you brought back a Wild Pyromancer, a pretty unexciting thing with your Onyx Bishop. You're still getting a 3/2 and a 3/4 for 5 mana, and that's a pretty reasonable deal. And that's like a worst case style scenario. if you bring back an Injured Blade Master, if you bring back, an Akanai Soul Priest, any sort of mid-range type of minion, you're getting an incredible deal from your Onyx Bishop, which is to say nothing of the possibilities if you somehow get an oversized minion back early in the game, or if later on, you end up bringing back something that was a Ragnaros that died. The huge upside possibilities that the card has. So I think that this is a card that people are definitely sleeping on, and is one of the cards that I'm definitely looking forward to try and build priest decks around with the new adventure. For number 3 top cards in this set, Medivh's Valet. This is a card that I think definitely goes into those controlling secret-based decks that I was talking about with Avian Watcher. Just a 2/3 minion for 2 gives a control priest, not a control priest deck, a control mage deck, a good card to play on turn 2 that is also very powerful later on. One of the problems with a lot of the mage 2-drops that have existed, I built a lot of control mage decks. Probably that and control priest are the 2 decks that I've built the most in Hearthstone. And one of the standouts to me, especially since Mad Scientist has been gone, is there's not that much that I want to play at 2 mana. Because a lot of what you want in a controlling deck are cards that can help you play a tempo game early on, can help fight against opposing minions early on, and a 2/3 body is good at that. It's better than a 3/2 would be because it doesn't trade down with 2/1s. It's more resilient to opposing 2/3s, things like that. And also, it has a very powerful late game effect. It's a hugely powerful tempo effect, doing 3 damage if you control a secret. So this is a card that I think very well may sort of reinvigorate control mage style decks in the metagame, and I know that Strifecrow is excited about it when we were talking about it at the reveal in LA, and I certainly am too. For number 3, in terms of underrated cards, I have Nightbane Templar. This is a card that I've heard people compare to like a Razorfen Hunter that has 1 extra 1/1. And yeah, that's true. It's in fact exactly what it is when it's turned on. But that's a lot. Getting an extra body is a huge deal in that sort of situation. Getting 1/1 extra stats can take something from being a mediocre card to an excellent card. And in particular, the fact that this is spread out across multiple bodies makes it work particularly well with buff effects, especially Keeper of Uldaman. Nightbane Templar works perfectly in a deck with Keeper of Uldaman because you get not only 1, but 2 1/1s that you can possibly use to just keep her up and attack right away. And while my previous sort of initial instinct on this was that, Dragon Paladin decks already have, competition at the 3 slot. They have Blackwing Technician, they have Eldar Peacekeeper. I think that Nightbane Templar opens up new possibilities for perhaps a more proactive, more aggressive style of deck. Might not want access to the Eldar Peacekeeper. Obviously, this is a much more powerful card to play on turn 3 than an Eldar Peacekeeper. So definitely a card that I think has kind of flown under the radar for a lot of people, and I think may sort of cause a resurgence in at least a new style of Dragon Paladin deck, and certainly one that I'm going to be playing with when it comes out. Number 2 on my top cards from the set is Menagerie Warden. And the most important thing about this is actually how you pronounce menagerie, so I hope all of you who keep saying that word wrong get it right at some point, because people are going to be saying this name a lot. This is a card that's kind of been controversial in the scene as far as people's reviews of it. I know Firebat was saying that he thought that this was outrageous card because of how powerful it is when combined with Stranglethorn Tiger. And I agree, the card is extremely powerful in those circumstances, but those circumstances don't come up that often. And the fact that your opponent is, kind of free to do what they're going to do until that stage of the game. If you're playing, a Druid deck that's just looking to curve 5 into 6, how many good Druid decks just curve 5 into 6 without like ramp and area events and things involved? It's not clear to me that this is going to be quite as metagame breaking as people seem to think. I think it's definitely a powerful card. It's number 2 on my top cards from the set, but I don't think it's quite the same problem that a lot of people are viewing it to be. Is a deck that's looking to play a turn 5 stealthed minion into turn 6 5/5 to copy them going to be able to compete with a deck like Zoo, with a deck like Dragon Warrior or Aggro Shaman? I think that a lot of the traditional weaknesses of a lot of Druid decks, Druid sort of ramp style decks that we've seen over the years, still are going to hold true to a deck that's built like this. But I do think that it's a very powerful payoff for a Beast Druid deck, and I do expect it to see a lot of competitive play, which is why I have it at number 2 on my top cards from the expansion. For underrated cards, number 2, I have Priest of the Feast. And a lot of people have been saying regarding this card and sort of the general Priest cards in the set, is that this is a good card, but it's not necessarily a card that priests really want. And I really disagree. I think that Priest of the Feast, obviously, yeah, maybe a 2-drop or a 3-drop would be a strong card that let you sort of gain control of the game early on, and might be more suited to fixing some of the problems that Priest has right now. But one of the problems that Priest has, and I've played a lot of Priest, one of the problems that Priest has in a lot of matchups is that because you're playing a reactive game in a lot of ways, a lot of times you can sort of fall behind and take a lot of damage. And yeah, you have a hero power that can heal you up, but in many cases you're taking big chunks of damage, and just healing yourself incrementally isn't really powerful enough to deal with that. One example is obviously Freeze Mage, one of the worst matchups sort of historically for Control Priest, simply because they can Alexstrasza you, then blow you up because you can only do so much healing in an individual turn, especially when you don't play with tons of healing cards. But a big thing about Priest of the Feast is that you don't have to play with a bunch of healing cards for Priest of the Feast to be powerful. When you have Priest of the Feast, every spell you have just gets gain 3 life tacked onto it. And that makes cards like Holy Smite, cards like Power Word Shield, cards like Circle of Healing, all so much more powerful against any kind of aggressive deck. And Priest, in many cases, yeah, it can fall behind on the board and suffer because, you don't necessarily find, Aconized Soul Priest, you may need Circle, whatever sort of board clears. This doesn't solve those problems, but this does give you a way to significantly mitigate when you fall behind in those ways, because you can just gain tons of life in a single turn by just cantripping with Power Word Shield, removing your opponent's minions with things like Holy Smite. It just gives you tons of ability to keep yourself alive and give you the time that you might need to draw into those combinations. So, and this is a card that has been really, really underrated, to say nothing of the fact that it's a 3/6 for 4, which is a great stat line. It's much better than most 4-drops. It has the stats of a water elemental. Obviously, that alone isn't enough to make it a standout card, but I think this is a card that is way better than people are really looking into. So this is a card that I think will really help revitalize Control Priest, and that's why I think it's number 2 underrated card in the set. All right, as far as the number 1 card in the set, I think the best card in the set, the most powerful card in the set, is Barnes. Barnes is a card that feels like it can enable so many different types of decks. This is a incredibly powerful card if you play it in a deck that has a lot of high impact, say, Death Rattle minions. You play Barnes, you get out a 1/1 copy of Sylvanas, you get a 1/1 copy of Cairn, a 1 copy of Tyrion. All of these, hugely powerful. To say nothing of the fact that Barnes itself has a reasonable body. It's not like Barnes isn't giving you, something that can have a significant board impact by itself. Also, Barnes works really well, people are going to joke about it, in the Silence Priest deck. Not going to be necessarily a super competitive deck, but it works very well in any deck that has silence effects, whether it's Priest or not, because you can just use the silence effect on the Barnes minion and get a full power, full size copy of that minion. If that minion is Ragnaros, you have an 8/8 Ragnaros that can attack. If it's Deathwing, you have a 12/12 Deathwing that can attack. And it also works extremely well in a Priest deck with Resurrect effects. You play Barnes, you get a 1/1 copy of Ragnaros, whatever, that dies, you play Onyx Bishop or Resurrect, and suddenly you have a full power copy of that card in play, and that's really powerful. It also works really well in any sort of deck that's looking to play just a single or a couple of powerful minions. This could be more difficult to pull off, because you're probably going to need to have more than one minion in your deck in most cases, but say you have just Emperor Thaurissan in your deck. Say it's your only minion, is Emperor Thaurissan. You play Barnes, it's guaranteed to get you a copy of Emperor Thaurissan, so you get redundancy in terms of the powerful combo effect there. Say you have Malagos. You can play Barnes to get a 4-cost Malagos and blow your opponent up with a bunch of burn spells. So this is a card that I think has huge potential in a variety of different decks, and that's why I have it as the number 1 card in the Karazhan adventure. As far as number 1 underrated card, I'm going to have to say it is Purify. No, just kidding. Though I do think people are giving Purify a little too much flack. I think the number 1 most underrated card in the expansion is Medivh. So Medivh, when I first looked at it, I was thinking, oh, this is cool. This is kind of like a creature with a summoning stone attached. That's kind of neat. I didn't think that it was really going to be a card that had any sort of potential for serious competitive play. I thought about it more, though. And the thing about Medivh is that it's a win condition. It's an endgame minion that is inherently resilient to removal, in the sense that it provides you with multiple bodies and significant value and tempo for all your future spells. Now, what I mean by that is, you can play Medivh, and if your opponent kills it, okay, they killed your Medivh. Like, let's say you're playing against a Dragon Warrior deck, and you're playing Control Priest, because I'm always playing Control Priest, because I have a problem. But I play Medivh, and let's say they play Ragnaros. Okay, they're like, you played a 7/7, I'll play my Ragnaros. Say Ragnaros hits Medivh. It's like, okay, obviously that's pretty bad for me. Their 8-cost minion blew up my 8-cost minion and is still on the board. Well, I still have Atiesh, Great Staff of the Guardian. So I can now, say, play Entomb on Ragnaros. And not only do I remove Ragnaros, but I create a 6-drop minion and still have Atiesh for future spells. And that enables all of my future spells to not only generate a sort of card advantage by creating additional minions when I play them, but also tempo advantage because I'm attaching this immediate Summoning Stone effect to my future spells. So this is going to be, I think, at its most powerful in decks like Control Priest and Control Mage that have significant spells, like significant higher cost spells, because obviously the higher the cost the spell is, the more powerful minion that you're going to get, which is obviously why I think it pairs especially well with Entomb. And I think that this may be, the sort of card that for a Control Priest deck could give them the tools to allow them to actually turn around games from a tempo perspective. Because one of the problems with Control Priest, sort of what I was talking about before, is when you fall behind. You fall behind and, you kind of struggle to clear the board, and, maybe you get an opportunity, you play Medivh, and now your removal spells also generate minions, and that's a huge tempo advantage that the Atiesh is giving you for at least the next 3 spells. Obviously, this is a lot weaker if you're forced to play cheap spells. You certainly don't want to go Medivh, Powered Shield him, gonna get you, haha. But if you are able to play stuff like Entomb, Flame Strike, Holy Nova, anything like that, I mean, we're not even going to go into playing Call of the Wild or whatever. But these are hugely impactful cards that can, when they're tied together with a body of the same casting cost. So I don't necessarily think that Medivh is a card that's going to sort of upend the metagame as far as slotting into existing powerful decks, but I do think it's a card that can serve as an excellent win condition for decks that might otherwise struggle to win games based on sort of tempo and outvaluing people, just the way the metagame has shaped itself to be. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the top 5 cards and the top 5 most underrated cards from the Karazhan adventure. Let me know your thoughts. Where do you think I'm right? Where do you think I'm wrong? Do you think that Purify is really that bad? But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.